as long as we do everything naked, Phil Weiser will be in favor of it.
You can price gouge as long as you're doing it in the bedroom with no clothes on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a good compromise.
I thought. Ari Armstrong is a columnist with Complete Colorado. He's also been, well, just at the forefront of libertarian thought in Colorado for a long time. I want to talk to him about price gouging. Ari Armstrong, how's your quarantine treating you?
We're actually pretty fortunate. We're doing fairly well so far. Thanks for accommodating my in-home studio, by the way.
Really? Are you too scared to get out? Is that are you masking up?
We're in a pretty tight bubble in my household, just because my wife is able to work from home and I'm able to work from home.
Who's gonna kill whom?
Well, we've kind of adjusted. We've made the adjustment so far. It was it's still rough sometimes. Today the son was kind of pouting about not being able to see his friends, which I understand. We're doing some Zooms with him too and some of his friends sometimes. So
how old's the boy now? How old is your son?
4 years old.
4. Yeah, he needs to get out and run around a bit. So it's got to be tough. I've got the same thing with my son who has Down syndrome. He wants to get out and do things, and it's tough. This is personal. My folks are in their 80s. I worry about them. My son has Down syndrome. If he got corona, it could be a bad thing. This is touching everybody.
Yeah, and I actually personally know now somebody who succumbed to this horrible disease. So unfortunately, as time moves on, more and more of us are going to have a very personal experience with this.
True. I don't think it's going to be the doomsday that we thought it was going to be. I think it's going to be bad, but I don't think it's going to be millions. But during this, people still need to transact. They still need to do things. I've heard people say we need to do something about price gouging. Price gouging is one of those terms that perks my ears. What is price gouging? Let me get your definition.
Well, price gouging is basically the term you use when you want to assume that somebody raising prices is bad. So it's like, wow, it's like you're gouging someone's eyes out. So you call it price gouging. But what's the difference between, say, raising prices in that way versus Uber driver surge pricing or Airbnb surge pricing? So it's really an arbitrary term that makes it sound something bad when really what we're talking about is I think the more neutral term is price surging.
It is price surging, but let's play this out for a second. Those of us who are comfortable with market transactions, when two people get together and one person sells an ice cream cone to another person, they both say thank you, because for the person buying it, that ice cream cone is worth more than the dollar he's paying for it. For the guy who has the ice cream cone and selling it, he values the dollar more than he values the ice cream cone he just gave away. And so they both walk away happier, more fulfilled. Now, if the ice cream cone is too much, then you grumble, but at some point you're not going to buy the ice cream cone unless it's worth the price being charged. Is that fair?
Right, and here we're talking about an emergency context. So what are people expecting? Well, they're expecting that people will want to consume more of some product, good, or service, and they're expecting that the supply of that good or service might dry up. And so that's why people were trying to buy more toilet paper. And so what raising prices does, now it's illegal through most of the country. Most states have laws against price gouging. And you can see the federal government has recently taken action under its emergency provisions to go after so-called price gouging. Paul Weiser, the Colorado Attorney General, has gone after price gouging, even though it's not technically illegal in Colorado. He's sort of trying to cover it under a separate unfair business acts clause in the statutes, which I think is dubious, I think is questionable. But where it's legal, people raising prices on important goods and services during an emergency is really important because it does two things on the supply side and the demand side. We can start with the demand side. What it does is it causes people to conserve their use of things. So we all know that there's all kinds of things. Toilet paper, bananas, basically any good you can think of. Water, gasoline. If the price goes up, people can figure out ways to use less of it. Some people more than others. And so what happens when prices go up, the people who conserve are leaving more of it for those more essential, more important uses.
Well, and also, let me jump in. And those who are hoarding, because I'm hearing two big things. We got to stop price gouging. We got to stop hoarding. Well, wait a second. If you allow price gouging, it takes care of the hoarding, because somebody who's sitting on a garage full of toilet paper is going to go, I know in 3 weeks this is going to be worth next to nothing. Now it's worth a lot, and he gets it out to people who want it, even at that higher price.
Well, this word hoarding is another strange term. It's applied to people who are just stocking up for their own personal stocks. Oh, you're hoarding this because you have too much rice or toilet paper, whatever. Well, often that's rational because people reasonably expect that there might be some supply problems down the future. So they put a little extra on the shelves. And then there's but then there's a related issue of people buying things with the intention of reselling it at a higher price later. Now, something I point out in this
Isn't
article
that called investing?
well, that too. But here's something strange about this, right? A lot of this is due to the actual laws against price gouging. Because consider the dynamics here, right? Government is saying, you as a store, if you raise prices, we're going to come after you. So stores don't raise prices. Guess what? Costco was selling toilet paper at the exact same price during the height of this crisis in March as it was selling it for 2 months earlier. I believe it was $19.99 for their 34 rolls, or something right in that range. Well, guess what? For about 3 weeks, I could not buy toilet paper at those prices. But the government is basically saying, if you raise prices, we'll go after you. So what is that encouraging people to do? It's encouraging other people who can go into those stores and buy it at the now low prices to go in and, quote, overbuy or hoard or whatever you want to call it, and then try to resell those goods elsewhere. So really, the problem that we're talking about is created by, largely, these laws against price gouging, because you're not allowing the stores to raise prices, which is what would actually dampen down people shopping. Now, of course, stores can do things like say, oh, you can only get so much per customer, but those laws only go so far, and it's pretty easy to slip around those laws, at least in most stores, right? Those policies, excuse me.
It really gives people a taste of Soviet Russia. Soviet Russia could always say, we are not raising the price of toilet paper. Nobody cares because there's no toilet paper. If you're saying if Costco were to raise the price of toilet paper, if instead of $20 for their big thing, they charged $40 for the big thing, people would buy a lot less, and therefore more people would be able to have access. In other words, price gouging, or trying to stop, quote, price gouging, is causing what they're calling hoarding. Let me play my analogy a little farther. All right, so in my analogy, guy has an ice cream cone, the other guy has $1. They switch, both walk away, much happier. That's terrific. But Caldera, that's an ice cream cone. What if it's not an ice cream cone? It's the shot of penicillin. It's the last bag of rice. It is a necessary thing to have. That is the heart medication I need. That is the food I need to feed my kids. I'm sorry, but it's now 20 times as expensive. Is that not price gouging?
Well, there's a couple of things to say here in response. First of all, these laws against price gouging, at least some people argue, is partly responsible for U.S. firms not buying up more of these N95 masks and other protective gear and emergency supplies like that. Because they think, geez, if we buy these and sell them at more, we're going to take a legal penalty here. So we'll just let them go to people across in other countries, and we'll let them buy them up and sell them for what they want. And so there's a good argument, I think, that these laws against price gouging are hurting our ability to buy some of these emergency goods. But we have to look at the other side too, not just the demand side, but the supply side. What do higher prices signal people to do? They signal to them, hey, make more of this thing. So we learn, people can make things at different prices, which is why, so for example, oil is a good example, right? When prices go up, they'll start using more wells. When prices go down, they'll cap more wells. And this is true of many industries. People can ramp up production or slow down production based on where the prices are at. Because if you move into a new method of production, it probably costs more to produce those extra units. And so we have to really look at what pricing does on both sides. On the demand side, it causes people to conserve. On the supply side, it causes people to make more or to make substitutes.
Listen, you heartless libertarian. I get this, and you're putting out your models, but we're talking about people here. We're not talking about in a few weeks when production is ramped up. What about in the emergency? There's a flood. There's this pandemic. The supply of whatever is not going to come in for weeks. The need for this product is right now. And the guy who has the store that has it, or the person who has stockpiled it, is selling it at an exorbitant rate. Are you willing to call that price gouging? I mean, at that moment in time, during that emergency, the town cannot get food because all the bridges have washed away. I got a lot of food, and I am charging 100 times what it's worth.
Well, what's obvious is if you...
not what it's worth, wrong statement. What it used to be worth.
Okay. What higher prices do in that emergency is that's when it's most important to have that kind of price surging. Because if you're sitting on your extra supplies of food or gasoline or an extra generator, you're not going to part with that for what you paid for it before the emergency. Because you always think to yourself, well, maybe I can use this myself, right? So you're going to have to have some extra incentive to part with some of those goods and services. Now, let me just also point out, right? I think people who will only part with that from higher prices should be allowed to charge higher prices. But we have to also look at the other side of capitalism. Capitalism doesn't just mean everyone is trying to maximize their immediate monetary profits. There's lots of other motivations people have. So, for example, here in Colorado and across the nation, we've seen lots of companies like distilleries get into business of making like hand sanitizer and giving it away for free. Why would they do that? Well, they have the time. They're not having customers come into their stores right now. They're able to afford it, and they want to build up some more public goodwill. I had a bunch of N95 masks because I was doing home projects, and it was actually worked out in a lucky way because I bought a bunch and then I hid them in my shed, and so then I bought another packet. But when the emergency hit, I didn't have an immediate need for these masks, so I just gave them away to a medical worker that I knew. So because I knew that was a more needed place. Now, is that part of capitalism? In my book, yes. Capitalism is interacting in voluntary ways. So what I'm not saying is that everyone should charge the highest price they can possibly get for any item. That's not the argument. My argument is that people should be allowed to set prices voluntarily because often those prices are going to be
libertarians keep thinking that everyone is a good actor. And that in that case, you've got people at the distilleries making hand sanitizers. You've got the Armstrong family giving away their masks. That's lovely. But as a socialist, I know people are evil inside. And the only way to prevent people from being exploited is to put limits on their freedoms and their freedoms of association. So even if you have a lot of food, I don't have any food, and I'm competing with everybody else for your food, I shouldn't pay you more. You've got to liquidate that food at pre-emergency prices because you might be nice and might be good, but every other operator is a bad person.
Well, first of all, that's not true, right? It's perfectly legitimate and moral to take concern with yourself and your family. And, there's a reason why people often tend to stock up on these things. But we can live in this fantasy world where incentives don't matter, where people don't respond to prices, where people just give away whatever they have to whoever needs it in this John Lennon-esque type Karl Marx world. But we all know that kind of world doesn't actually work. So, there's a principle in medicine that says doctors should first do no harm. You shouldn't give patients, say, a drug or procedure if you think that it's going to make their situation worse. Well, I think legislators and people enforcing the law should take a similar outlook. If what you're doing is going to make the problem worse, regardless of your ideology, you should not do that thing, right?
They think they're making it better. I guarantee you, Phil Weiser, being a good-hearted social justice warrior and progressive, is not cracking down on this because he wants to hurt people. In his heart, he wants to help people. Do you doubt that?
No, I don't doubt that people are wrong all the time. People do things which are dangerous all the time. So when the fellow ate his fish tank drugs He thought he probably really thought he was going to help himself avoid coronavirus. Of course, that's not what happened. That it killed him, right? So people can be mistaken about the effects that actions will have. And that's what I think is going on with price gouging. I think that people are looking at the effects of price gouging laws and they're saying, oh my gosh, these are the problems that we need price gouging laws for. Well, look at what is creating the problems. What is creating the shortages? What is creating these incentives to go in and try to clear store shelves and stock up on these items to resell later?
Are the price
It is
gouging
precisely
laws?
the price gouging laws.
That's amazing and well said. So can I have any of your extra masks?
I am fresh out, so.
Well, you've got your own, don't you? I bet you saved one for yourself, you greedy bastard.
Well, like I said, because we're fortunate, we're able to bubble pretty well. We don't need to get out, so I didn't really have a need for them. So I have figured out how to make those just a t-shirt mask with some of my wife's hair bands.
Some of your wife's hair bands. I want to see that. This column was terrific. It's at CompleteColorado.com. People should grab it. People should share it. But it's so easy to take away people's rights for free association. You know, what consenting adults do should be no business of government. And I'm always amazed that Phil Weiser and crew, if people want to do what they want to do in the privacy of their own home in their bedroom and their clothes are off, they are there to protect their right to free association, but only when they're naked. When it comes to their clothes being on and they're at a Costco, then that freedom of association and consensual relationship doesn't exist. So my goal is, as long as we do everything naked, Phil Weiser will be in favor of it.
You can price gouge as long as you're doing it in the bedroom with no clothes on.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good compromise.
I thought. All right. Thanks for everything. Appreciate it. Look for the next one. And thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.